Jerusalem, 2,000 years ago. It is a desperate time. Inside the walls of Jerusalem, factions of Jews are fighting with one another. Outside of Jerusalem's walls, the Romans who control the region, led by a general named Vespasian, are preparing to attack. Some Jews want to fight the Romans, even though they know they cannot defeat that mighty army. Other Jews believe that surrendering is the more prudent choice. The divisions among the Jewish factions are enormous. Most of the people inside of the city walls are sick and starving. The future looks bleak. The fate of the city seems to be sealed. As tensions continue to mount throughout Jerusalem, a leading sage named Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai summons his students. Inside of a study hall nestled deep somewhere inside the fragile and distressed city, Yochanan ben Zakkai proposes a plan, a very risky plan that requires a great amount of courage. Failure will lead to certain death. He needs to escape from Jerusalem. Now, the only people permitted to leave the city at this time are mourners who are carrying their dead to be buried outside of the city walls. Yochanan's plan is to fake his own death and have his students smuggle him out of the city in a coffin. And miraculously, this plan works, and Yochanan and his students escape. Now, the second part of his plan is just as risky. Yochanan manages to secure a meeting with the brutal Roman general Vespasian, and he makes an extraordinary request. Vespasian, he says, "When you become the emperor of the Roman Empire, I have one request. Ten li Yavne v'chachameha." These four extraordinary words changed the course of Jewish history and saved Judaism. Ten li Yavne v'chachameha, give me Yavne and its students. Far from Jerusalem, the historic center of Judaism, Yochanan ben Zakkai established a learning academy in the small coastal town of Yavne. There, he and his disciples reinvented Jewish life. Sacrifice was no longer the predominant Jewish ritual practice. Prayer took its place. One did not need to be in Jerusalem to celebrate Judaism. One could do so in the home. Learning and law became the guiding lights of Judaism, not sacrifice. And our model today of rigorous study, robust communal life, and home-based observance were built by Yochanan and his disciples in Yavne. And while his world was collapsing around him and the existence of Judaism was in peril, he found a way to innovate and reinvent Judaism so that it could survive. The Yavne model builds new frameworks from scratch upon existing foundations. There is, however, another compelling model. It is less traumatic and disruptive and enables us to repair existing frameworks. This is the Mishkan model. Now, the Levites were the smallest tribe of the ancient Israelites. However, they had the most important job of all the tribes. They were responsible for the Mishkan, the desert tabernacle. Set up in the middle of the Israelites' temporary camp, the Mishkan was the focal point for all of the Israelites. The Mishkan was a sanctuary. It was where sacrifices took place. It was the dwelling place of God. It was also mobile. Every time the Israelites moved to a new camp, which they did regularly as they wandered through the desert wilderness, the Levites would dismantle, transport, then reassemble the Mishkan. Each time they took it apart, they examined every ring, socket, thread, and cord. And when a Levite noticed that something was damaged, he repaired it. If it was broken beyond repair, he replaced it. Because they paid close attention to the structure, the Mishkan was always strong and secure as it was transported through the desert. And each time it was reassembled, it looked exactly the same, but it was a little stronger than before. Yavne and the Mishkan provide us with two different yet complementary models that are very much at the heart of our High Holy Days. The Yavne model invites us to begin again from scratch to completely reinvent ourselves. The Mishkan model invites us to closely examine ourselves, our behaviors, words, actions, and practices, and make ourselves better. Periodically, we dismantle, inspect, and repair what is broken. And sometimes we have to completely rebuild. Each model provides us with a practice that leads to complete tshuva, a return to our essence, to becoming the best version of ourselves. And when we enact a Yavne model, we are completely transformed inside and out. When we enact a Mishkan model, we are stronger on the inside, even though outwardly we look the same. And so, friends, as we enter a new year, we need to incorporate the rebuilding aspects of Yavne and the repairing aspects of the Mishkan into our lives. This process begins with an inspection and introspection. We closely examine our behaviors and habits and the foundations of our lives: home, career, school, religious life, social life. We determine what new frameworks need to be built and which existing structures simply need to be repaired and strengthened. We've all experienced our share of tragedy and trauma over the past 18 months. Some of us are completely broken and need to rebuild our lives from scratch. The unexpected death of a loved one, an extended period of joblessness, a business that failed, or the end of a marriage can destroy everything and force us to rebuild like Yavne. Others of us have had disappointments and difficulties, but nothing that caused our structure to collapse. Some of its fixtures need to be examined, repaired, or swapped out, but it does not need to be replaced. Despite tragedy and trauma, disappointment and difficulty, managing competing demands of home and school, starting a new job remotely, Zoom fatigue, we can also reflect on the blessings of these past 18 months. After all, the disruption of the pandemic did help us find greater joy in some facets of our lives. Adult children who returned home enabled parents to connect with them on a different level. People found more time to learn a new hobby or incorporate a new practice into their lives. We had time to reflect on our priorities and aspirations. Some of us learned to play an instrument or baked challah every week. Sourdough bread seemed to be a thing. Some enjoyed the additional hours with family because they were no longer commuting several hours each day. We enjoyed casual Friday and casual Monday through Thursday as well. These, my friends, are some of the blessings that brought us joy. And so as we continue to emerge from the affliction of COVID and reflect on the period before the pandemic, we ask ourselves, what do we want to completely tear down and rebuild from scratch like Yavne? And what do we want to maintain and strengthen, similar to how it was before, like the Mishkan? Which combination of Yavne practices and Mishkan practices will make our lives strong, healthy, stable, and secure? These days of awe require us to reflect on the past and learn lessons from it as we forge a way forward to a future that remains unknown, but has the potential to be very bright. Blessings of the pandemic can also emerge out of our darkest and most difficult moments. Nothing was worse than watching a loved one die alone, hearing their last loving words shared through a cell phone, held by a nurse completely covered in PPE. And yet, silver linings emerged after losing a job at the moment your aging or ill parent needed greater care that you could now provide. Blessings where an unexpected change in one's circumstances enabled them to try something completely new and different, a career change, a move to a new city, early retirement. People who were used to lengthy commutes, long working hours, and time away from home to further their careers now had the chance to reevaluate their priorities. If we can make permanent the temporary changes that the pandemic imposed on us and that brought us joy and contentment, then we will have benefited from these last 18 months in ways that were once hard to imagine. Just as there have been blessings in our own lives, so too have there been joys and blessings in the life of our synagogue and greater community. And while the pandemic forced us to move completely to Zoom for most of our services and programs, we discovered that more of you were yearning to connect with us, and you could do so from the comfort of your home. We had more people join us for Shabbat services on Zoom than we ever had in the sanctuary on a given week. The pandemic brought about that Yavne-style change. We expanded programming beyond the walls of Shir Me, providing meaningful and impactful gatherings that would take place outside of our building. The synagogues of the Bucks County Kehillah programmed more together this year than we ever have before. And this would not have happened, or at least so quickly, without the pandemic. And now, my friends, there's no turning back. My guess is that Ross and friends will be at the back of our sanctuary every year from now as we continue to live stream and be in person. Because we will continue to offer services, programs, classes, and social events online as well as in person, enabling us to reach more of our community on a regular basis. No longer is the inability to drive at night, nor having time to eat dinner before services, or even being in Florida for the winter, impediments to accessing all that Shir Me has to offer. We need to rebuild like Yavne and repair like the Mishkan. We will continue to create mission-aligned programs that look completely new and different, but are built on an existing foundation. We will evaluate and modify some of what we do already, but that could be done better. Imagine neighbors inviting one another to their home for Shabbat dinner and then tuning into a Zoom-only Shabbat service that night. I don't think we would have ever considered that pre-pandemic. Now we can. Imagine people gathering together at Shir Me to welcome a scholar zooming in from the West Coast to teach us. We would have never considered this prior to the pandemic, but this year, much of our lifelong learning will adopt that model. We can join for 15 minutes on Zoom for a short meditation to begin the day, or have committee meetings, all of our committee meetings, virtually. Right, Ellie? All of these innovations, so we can stay home at night. All of these innovations have contributed to a new vitality at Shir Me, and one that we will continue to build upon for years to come. Friends, the months and years ahead will be filled with elements of Yavne, building a completely new framework, and elements of the Mishkan, the same structure but stronger and more secure. This construction work will take place in our homes, the synagogue, our schools, and our workplaces. However, all of this work must begin within first. What in your life needs to be rebuilt? What needs to be repaired? How can you experience moments of blessing during these difficult and uncertain times? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai brought into being a living, breathing, and vibrant Judaism out of the ashes of a destroyed Jerusalem. We too can rebuild and restore meaningful Jewish lives from the devastation of the pandemic. We have been broken, but not beyond repair. Let us rebuild towards a promising future filled with hope, joy, opportunity, and blessing. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will.